the filmmakers did a really good job talking about, I think the race component was missing, but of course about talking about masculinity, about nationalism, about, the way that the military functions as an institution. And I'm not going to repeat, like my personal experiences or anything, because I think everything covered in here is just enough to show you that what the situation is. And I have spoken with so many people and counseled so many women who have such similar stories, about the way that they were treated by their command and all of those things. And I mean, it's just, I'm sure you guys probably have a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions, a lot of things you want to talk about. So yeah, please.
Projected off.
Yeah, it's okay.
What's the current status of the appeal?
Of the appeal?
Of the appeal.
It's still, nothing's happened thus far. I think it's supposed to be in late this year, like November, December or something. I was trying to Google a little bit about the race component of it as well, because I found it very interesting that the majority of the people they covered in this were white women. And to be honest, I know that there's a lot of racial issues tied into this as well, especially that Black and Hispanic women are assaulted and discharged at much higher rates than white women. So, and especially that their cases are covered up so easily. And I think that the hierarchy of what happens in the military just really reflects the hierarchy of what is true in American society. And to be a Black woman who's enlisted is kind of, the bottom of the totem pole. And for your commander, of course, to be a white man who's in charge of things and making these decisions, can look at a young 18, 19, 20-year-old Black woman and say, she's really not that important to the military. It doesn't matter if she leaves, and there's not much to, pursue her case or anything. But if you look at the ranks of the colonels and above, there's very few Black women. There's very few women of color at all represented, and so the people making these decisions about what to do in sexual assault cases and all this stuff are all old white men. So how are those people supposed to understand or want to understand anything when the military that they've existed in has been such an old boys club and a white old boys club that these people they think of as so replaceable and insignificant. And most if you look at what the U.S. military does in general, there's so much tied up in this in general, going off to Iraq, all the women who are assaulted. Imagine, this is what's happening in the U.S. military. Imagine what's happening to places where the U.S. military is occupying places. Imagine the Iraqi woman, the Afghanistan woman, like all of that stuff. So it's really, really just, I think the interesting thing about, I think a few people mentioned culture, and somebody said towards the end that it's a sexual assault problem, it's not just a culture. And I think that was said, I would put it in the opposite way. It's an entire culture. The cultures of rape, the cultures of drinking, the cultures of abusing women, of really sexually abusive and degrading things being okay and normal, the way that even, military chants and stuff are really degrading to women. And, there's none of that is looked at as the culture. When you come in as a 16, 17, 18-year-old boy and you go through all of these things, all of these trainings, you go to boot camp and you hear, the chants that you learn and the things, everything that you're taught and that's put in your face is just that it's okay. It's okay, no matter what you do. And then you start hearing from people who have been in, who are your supervisors, that this is okay, and I did it, and I got away with it, so you can too. And it was really interesting, that statistic of 25, I think it was 20 or 25%, 20%, that of people who go into the military, or men going in, have attempted or raped somebody before. And the U.S. military still practices that when you commit a crime, you have the option sometimes of either going to jail or going into the military.
Oh.
Yeah, it's still for especially for 17-year-old kids, like who are not quite 18 and can't be punished as adults. You have the option to go into the military. I guess I will also say I was awesome that they included a lesbian couple. I actually was kicked out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I was a first lieutenant. About to become a captain, and then I was kicked out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which is the military policy that prevented gays and lesbians from serving openly. So I had many issues, I guess, being Indian, being lesbian, being a woman, all of these things in the military, but it was like that woman said at the end, I could not agree more. Glad I never have to put that uniform on again. I was so freaking glad. And I guess even also that story where she talks about talking to that woman in the restaurant. I look at so many young women and what's pitched to you is this this camaraderie, this family, and it especially, I think, appeals to vulnerable girls and kids, people who have come from broken homes, who don't have like really strong family support networks, people who aren't necessarily doing very well in school. Like, it's an alternate identity. And then to take on that identity as a Marine, and it is an identity. Every single person that you talk to who has served, even if they're retired 20 years, will say, you know, like, I will introduce themselves as, hi, I'm a Marine. You know, and for a kid, a 17, 18-year-old kid, to take on that identity is such a, you know, they embrace it so openly. And I really like how they talk about, you know, the family connection, because, you know, in a place like that, it's supposed to be all about trust and thinking of people as your, I mean, they are your support network, they are your family, you're part of this. It's still called a brotherhood, of course, you know, but it's part of this whole, you know, joining something, becoming part of something. And it's really difficult on both ends. First of all, for the women, the young women who are joining, and this is what they find. And also for the young men who are joining, looking for something to belong to, an identity or, you know, whatever it is. And what they find is that the devaluation of human life, it's not just happening to women. And I think this is really hard to articulate, and I will try to do my best. But there's just there's a ranking of what human lives are worth, right? And white men with all of the power sit at the top. And people, of course, there's the, you know, the black woman who's an American soldier, but even below her are these people who are in Afghanistan or, you know, wherever we are, and their lives are just literally, and this is military language, collateral damage. You know, like, oh, well, if we killed a couple thousand people or a couple, you know, whoever, it's not a big deal. At least we got that one person we're trying to do something about. So this hierarchy just really plays out, and I'm not even going to say this film looks at these men, and it's very much from the women's angle of, and which is, you know, wonderful, and it's beautifully done and really amazing, but it's looking at these men as like these horrible, terrible perpetrators, which, yes, in one regard they are, but I wouldn't even place the majority of the fault on them. I would place it on the military institution. And when you go into the military and like the way that you're treated and the things that you're taught, you know, I think, I don't know if everyone understood, but that one woman, when she was kind of sitting in a bar, and that, what was her name? Trina. And that, like the room, looking at the room with a funny angle or whatever. It's this feeling of like, you're trained as a soldier. When you went to boot camp and everything, you're trained as a soldier to always be aware of what is going on. Who's walking in the door, you know, like what, every single movement that's happening. And when you're raped, that is probably the worst thing that can happen to you, because you remember every sound, you remember every smell, you remember every little thing, as somebody who's trained to be a soldier. And when it comes back to, I really like how they, you know, it's wonderful, the couples that they showed here and everything, but I think they probably critified it, and it's really difficult to talk about, but like, this is a really serious struggle for the people who are the partners of these women, you know, to deal with, like, the man says, like, he doesn't understand. Corey's husband says he doesn't understand. He still doesn't understand. And I think, I'm a big advocate of therapy, but all of these women, of course, need serious therapy. But I think the part of the thing that therapy really, you know, helps you understand is exactly what's going on in a human brain, you know? And so, like, the way she talks about when he puts his hands on her hips, like what it reminds her of. And it's all of those things that come from, you know, that heightened sense of what's going on during that, and it's embedded in your memory. And so I think for these women, like, I'm not sure, of course, what your guys' background is, but I think for a lot of people, sometimes it's really hard to understand that, why are you committing suicide over a rape? Why are you killing yourself because of, you know, something that somebody else did to you? And I think it's really hard for people who haven't had this experience to understand, like, how deeply it affects your life and your being, especially when you're somebody who gave yourself up for an identity, like to be a Marine or a soldier or an airman, and then that entire system has crashed down around you, and, you know, you're losing out on your husband, your boyfriends, whatever it is, because it's impossible to maintain those relationships. One other thing briefly that I wanted to say is the whole institution and everything, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of research on what's going on in the military in terms of, you know, soldiers in general, even men, especially men. There's a lot of research on them committing suicide, coming back and having, you know, severe post-traumatic stress disorder. The Veterans Affairs people just never respond. I actually worked in Obama when he was a senator. I worked in his office doing like the VA administrative part, and it is mind-boggling the amount of men and women who serve, and the VA just comes back with this 10% of your disability is related to the military. You know, like there is, while you're in the military, the healthcare is amazing. It's absolutely wonderful. Like it is completely taken care of. Everything's 100% free. There's no, you know, questions asked about anything. And then all of a sudden you get out, and then there's somebody who's taking a year and a half to judge what your qualifications are, what you deserve to have covered for you. And for somebody like Corey, who it would be, I imagine in her emotional state, really impossible to hold down a job and, you know, deal with normal life in so many ways. And to be told that actually this isn't our fault, this wasn't our problem, this, you know, isn't the responsibility of the military, is just so crazy. Everything in general about, you know, what's going on in Iraq and all of the soldiers who come back from there with this dehumanization is really the only way that I can put it. You know, being taught as a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid how to kill people and not care about it just makes an environment ripe for rape or for, you know, the type of abuse that's happening there. So, okay, I'll shut up. Please, if you guys have questions or anything you want to discuss.
What is the ratio between the men and the women in the military? Roughly, is it same? It's not the same, I'm sure.
It's different for every branch. The Air Force is about, I think, 25% women. Maybe it's closer to 30, 26, 27. The Marines is the least, and Navy and Army are kind of in between. So we're still talking like the Marines is like 18, 19% women.
Oh, so there are a lot more men than...
Oh, yeah. And to me, I mean, I'm sure probably some of you want to ask if I have ever...
It's also a double-edged sword, no? Because on the one hand, you're supposed to be insensitive in a way because you're trying to kill your... And then on the other hand, this is a very sensitive issue, so you have to deal with people who are around you with sensitivity. So I think that's where the balance is lost.
Yeah. Or they talk about masculinity, though. That's part of the issue, right? That you're supposed to be a manly man, and that means, you know, that you do. And I have heard of stories where people, you know, even if there's a group of people and they're gang raping a girl and somebody says, I don't want to have anything to do with this, that person's called a pussy, you're a wimp, you're not, you know, you're not a real man, and stuff like that. And a lot of boys and men just like almost feel forced into it sometimes.
I think what screamed at me was the missed opportunity of the bystander. You know, I mean, for me personally, whether it's the military or any other situation, I think the bystander, and mainly male bystanders, are what's going to stop sexual abuse to women and to men in some cases. Because, I mean, I hate to say it, but often these conversations, or even that the programs that they have are led by women. Most of the Congress people they were speaking to were women, and in general, people are, you know, at the end of the day, I feel that men are ideally going to play a stronger role in ending assault on women than women are. But I think, you know, how do you feel, or do you think it would be possible based on your experience? You know, I think shifting the peer pressure is what's going to happen right now. The peer pressure is to stay quiet from bystanders. So I think there's just a huge missed opportunity in changing what peer pressure means in the military. And your peer pressure should lead you towards telling the truth or standing up for women as opposed to keeping quiet. And, you know, as long as there's a woman who's, you know, obviously Botoxed, you know, leading that effort, I don't think that you'll see a significant change. I mean, you know, that's my opinion. It was it screamed at me that, and obviously on purpose, you know, the documentary did make it amusing because it is ridiculous the way they were doing it, and I think we all felt that way. We all laughed, and it was ridiculous. But that opportunity, I mean, I think it works better when men tell other men that it's a bad thing.
Absolutely, that's very true.
And that was missing. I mean, it seems to be missing.
I think that it's there, to be honest. I think that they picked this, and the people who were represented and stuff was obviously slightly comical, but you know, it is a lot of. I remember these trainings were just so, you know, it's led by these colonels or these, you know, these people who are kind of the big shots on base, and then they get everyone together and say, like, do not rape people. You know, but that doesn't change the fact that you go, again, like, you go out drinking at night. The base where I was in Turkey was really, really common, and girls were told this, like, arriving on base that, what is it called? That drug, the date rape drug. What is it called?
Rupees.
Rupees. Those were really, really just like the easiest thing on earth to get. And there were, right outside our base, there's this line of Turkish bars. That's where everyone goes after work. And yeah, this is craziness, but it's true that you are actually in some situations required to go drinking, And then they have something called a buddy system, a wingman system in the Air Force. And, it's just this, it's complicated, right? Of course, because yes, men do need to stop this culture. It needs to just not be, so easy and not be ingrained in people that it's okay. But on the other hand, this whole concept of, the wingman and to always be with somebody and all that stuff is just so belittling. I find it very belittling even here when people tell me like, what are you doing out at 2 a.m. alone? You should have a man with you. Like that kind of thing. And I will say, I'm sure probably a lot of you are wondering if, I've never been sexually assaulted in the military, but I was assaulted quite a few times on this, on a Turkish base, and quite a few, like even off the base and stuff. And, when I went to my commander, who's a major, and said to him, like, this and this happened, he says, why didn't you have one of your airmen walk you home? I am a first lieutenant supervisor of about 500 airmen who work under me, and I'm supposed to go to those kids, and say, please walk me home? Like, what the fuck is this? And so this whole idea of the onus being on, the woman to take care of her or whatever. I mean, God, the stories that were just in this are mind-boggling, but so very well representing all of the situations that happened, the childhood scandal. I had just entered the Air Force when the Air Force Academy scandal happened, and it was in response to that as soon as when I went to active duty, there were so many trainings on like, making sure that you don't rape people and having a wingman around and all of this kind of stuff. It was crazy, but that doesn't, putting together, like she says, 20 slides on, we are committed to stopping blah, 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 doesn't change the culture. It just doesn't change the culture, especially when, there was a joke even in like our units that it's not, the program is called, I was a sexual assault response coordinator on this base in Turkey. And so this is what the program is called, the sexual assault response training. Everyone used to joke about it as a sexual assault training because it's something that really tells you what not to do, right? And it's made by men who are the people who are obviously thinking in terms of how do we protect these men who are our future leaders, because yes, they are. All of those people who are being excused for rape and getting away with it are going to be your future colonels and your, generals and all of that, because all of these women are clearly leaving, and all of the women who haven't reported are also leaving, and all of the women who have reported and nothing's happened and they've been kicked out or whatever else has happened, they're all leaving too. So when is that voice of women, like, really legitimately going to reach the levels of leadership? And, my same thing as far as, like, queer rights and all of this stuff went as well. There's no way in hell I was ever going to become a general. There was just no way. I've never seen an Indian person higher than the rank of captain. Anyway, this woman who was speaking, Anu, was also a captain, I think, in the Marines or something. But I've never seen an Indian person, let alone an Indian woman, higher than rank of captain. So, it's a path, it's a set path that almost removes people and forces women out and refuses to take care of their needs and just, the military is just kind of screwed.
Can you talk, if you want to, about what drew you to the military in the first place?
Those really cool shots of like the jets taking off from the fighter. Yeah, that's
you
what
watched Top Gun.
Yeah, not Top Gun, but my father was an engineer. I always worked with planes, and I was always around planes. And when the time came, like education and stuff in America is just completely unaffordable, and I saw these awesome ads, and they do talk about, it is very. I also will honestly say I was from one of those families that was just so problematic and traumatic in its own sense that I was just looking for somewhere to belong so seriously. And these ads of like, be all that you can be, nobody tells you what's really going on there. So yeah, I signed the papers when I was almost, I think, 16. I took a scholarship, which meant that I would be studying for 4 years, doing training during that time, and then I would be active duty for 4 years. And between all of everything that happened with the queer issues and all of this stuff, don't ask, don't tell is a whole separate issue, but basically I did my 4 years of training, I did my 2 years active duty, 6 months reserve, was recalled, did another year of active duty, and then I was kicked out and told that I owe the military $20,000 for being kicked out. So,
You owe them?
Yeah, because I didn't complete my 4 years or whatever. I'm sure there's going to be a class action suit on that sooner or later, so I'm just hanging out in India till that happens.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Ma'am, there are certain societies in this world which are rape-free.
Yeah.
Okay, which are rape-free. So don't these military follow the models of that society? Do they attempt to do that in any way?
I don't.
Can you tell us which society are you in? That would be very enlightening.
She's asking what.
I didn't get her question.
I said, can you
Which
tell us
societies in the world are
I don't know
rape-free?
the name, but there are certain rape-free societies. Very few of them, but there are.
Which ones?
What do you mean by societies? Like.
Sorry?
What do you mean by societies? Indigenous communities or like?
No, like, certain cultures where, like rape is non-existent. So like, where there's a lot of gender equality and things like that. Like people are sensitized in a certain way. So I was wondering if these societies, are these taken up as a kind of model to educate the military or things like that? Are you aware of anything on those
Honestly,
lines?
I don't think I've ever heard of such a study or anything. I've never heard of anything. Secret society. No, I've never heard of.
But the military, by its definition, brutalizes people, right?
Yeah.
Military, by it's made to make you
Purpose.
into a brute, meaning into an animal that can kill. So rape would be logical for them.
Even the age, they're all very young. 16, 17, 18, 20. I mean, they don't even know what's right or wrong.
And it's really confusing too to a kid, like to be 18 or 19 or 20 and be sent off to Iraq where it's completely okay to rape and kill Iraqi women, right? And that's happened. I'm sure you guys have heard these big cases about people who run rampant, killing and raping, somebody in Afghanistan a couple of years ago, all of this stuff. And then you go back to America and all, those women who are your colleagues, you're supposed to care about them a little bit more because of their skin color, because of their passport, their nationality, I don't know what. But how does a 19-year-old kid really understand that, And what is the difference between them? What is the difference? Their nationality, their worth, their value, and that worth or value that who has taught you? The military has taught you, right?
Yeah.
It sucks. It sucks to be the boys. It sucks to be every woman, but it really sucks to be,
Yeah, just to comment on the question, I don't think that when a man or a rapist, when he's 16 or 17, does not know what is right or wrong. I think if you've been following the debates about the age of maturity, clearly the age when somebody becomes an adult in India is 18. However, the age of maturity, the courts and the things, in order to debate about it, is not necessarily 18. So when you're 16 or 17, when you're harming somebody else, you know you're harming somebody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question about what role did the rhetoric of patriotism play when the commanders were condoning sexual assault? Like, would they say, I know what you, if they even said, I know what you went through is awful, but look, we are trying to end terror. We are trying to...
Absolutely. There's a lot of, this is a small problem, this is a minor problem. We have bigger things to deal with. Why don't you get out there and actually help us fight the terrorists? Why don't you, and there's a lot of even making girls and women, feel like you're detracting from the mission by bringing this up. You're taking away, how can you accuse, I love that part where they talk about, and because it's so prevalent, right, that these, especially serial rapists, that they're the Airmen of the Year people, right? They're the stellar, just outside amazing performers, and this is it's a symptom, if you will, of sociopath, right? It's really common in sociopaths that they are these perfect socialites, and yet, all of these, whether they're murderers or rapists, serial, whatever they are, but it's something that is acknowledged and known in psychology very well, and yet the people just try to pretend like, but it couldn't have been this boy. No, this airman did not do that. Like, it's you, look at you, you're a mediocre whatever you are, and airman or soldier or whatever it is, and that's not compared to this person's performance. Of course, the world is made, and the military is made for men to have so many more opportunities and to perform better and to whatever it may be, but men are always put into that position of importance. Like, we need this soldier, we need this guy on the front lines, we need this person, he's going to be an amazing captain, he's going to be an amazing general one day, or whatever it is. And these women are made to feel like you're such an insignificant person in this giant-ass military, and your story is insignificant too. And how dare you detract from this person's career and this person's path and the contribution that they're making. It's not even unspoken, it's blatantly said.
I think it's also since in society, not only in the military, I think in society we treat the conditioning is different. When a man sleeps with 10 women, he's called a stud.
Right.
And when a woman sleeps with 2 men, she's called a whore.
Yeah.
So at the root of it is society. I think if it changes in society, it will change everywhere.
Yeah.
And so these guys who are in the military and who are so young, they obviously believe that.
Yeah.
They feel if they've slept with a woman, they're the biggest studs.
Yeah. They actually, in the Air Force, they say, and it's a very common phrase taught to everyone, every woman in the military, you're either a bitch, a slut, or a dyke. Those are your 3 options.
So they don't think they're doing anything wrong in that sense.
They're told that it's okay.
Right.
It's shown that it's okay.
Right.
You know, their buddy does this, or you know, somebody drugs somebody and rapes them. No, there's no consequence. You know, so of course it's okay.
I wanted to bring up one important thing is that something about this film which it doesn't directly address. It's because the women are admitted in the military. The issue of rape at least is being talked about. It's not something that it's a historical kind of a look at it. But because otherwise men in the military have been raped over the years.
Yeah.
And the perpetrators were not, were not penalized in any way. Probably were raped when they were young. It's just that they inherit that kind of tradition and keep that edifice going. And women, because they have the sense of being violated, somewhat of it is talked about, and that's why rape on men also would be talked about. So that's a very important thing to address in that sense. It's the presence of women at least kind of gives a voice to the sexual assault within this kind of violence, which is tolerated over the years, for generations for that matter, and everywhere.
It's complicated, the issue about abusers, having been abused.
No, it's not a generalization.
Yeah.
Not every perpetrator is a victim.
Absolutely.
But it could be very much that because you inherit that tradition and you imbibe it, that you don't question it at all.
Yeah, there's a whole psychology field of study on that. But yeah, I would agree. I think it was really awesome that they showed that male aspect because it is probably one of the most silenced aspects, right? If you're a man, if you're a woman, at least you can be looked at as a survivor and somebody who's speaking out for women or whatever. If you're a male, you're either gay, which gets you out of the military anyway, or you're a wimp, or you asked for it, or you're a pussy. And that's like very much how men, there isn't very much, it's really embarrassing as a man. It destroys you as your masculinity as a man, etc. And so there's been a lot of the silence around that is really, really extreme. I will say that the history of women being raped has been, since they entered the military, obviously since that day, and I'm sure for men, ages and ages.
Is being gay in the military still not allowed?
That changed in November of 2010. That was 5 months after I got kicked out. Yeah.
But what is really disturbing is that while the lawsuits by these 17 people was filed in the Supreme Court, it was dismissed. That is, the whole kind of argument is that once you bring out justice out in open, there will be some redressal. But here this is a tighter slap in the face.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially for women who get kicked out she showed a lot of examples of women who are, charged for adultery or whatever it is, but just turning it on the woman as her fault and trying to get her out
and who are
quietly.
Economically and medically and in every way suffering, and they who are making such an effort to come out there.
Yeah.
So few of them, and this is what you do.
I think it just shows how ingrained this whole power system is. Everyone that you see in Congress, the majority of people making decisions, everyone in the Department of Defense, all of the people who are...
Just this whole thing of protecting America and patriotism. That is most important. And
absolutely.
Matters.
Yeah, it didn't really happen, right? This doesn't happen in America. I liked how the guy at the end was talking about it has the potential to be a great military. I think that's an oxymoron, right? A great military.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody here has experience of what happens in India. If anybody would like to talk about it, because it's something, I don't know statistics, but I can imagine that it happens much
Much
more
worse.
widely.
I mean, you don't have to go as far as the military. It could start at your home. I mean, that's what is coming out more and more, that it's actually starting much younger. And it's starting at ages which is unimaginable. 2, 5, 6, 8, those ages. So you don't have to go as far
Imagine
as...
what happens, say, in a police force where there's a lot of women recruitment today. In the military, there's not as much. But in the police force, there's a huge amount of women's recruitment. So you can imagine what may be happening. I don't think anybody has dealt with that over here.
Well, the documentary that we saw was from a mature country where at least saying aloud or making a documentary was possible with the people, with their adulations. If you just keep reading our own news articles that keep coming up, last year in the month of April 2012, there was a so-called report that 29 out of 70 police women who were recruited in Nasik apparently had abortions within a span of 3 months. So if they're not allowed to get out of the academy, there have been suicides which were recently recorded by the lady who was working in the army. She committed suicide. 2 months back, her mom committed suicide, and now they're blaming it to the overall judiciary system. The point is, it is not about the country or the society. It is about, there's a phrase which says that it is always the society which is responsible and funds its own destruction. If you think about it, there is no law which gives that kind of justice, which is responsible towards giving the dignity to the person, you may call it weaker sex, or to the person who wants to exercise his unsatisfaction. We are talking about, there is no education. You will not see that this is happening with the uneducated lot or the people who are maybe more matured. It is about the people who they feel are the ones who cannot do any harm to them. It's about the people, they feel that they are empowered to do something to them. They will never try and do it, and they are that. We will not see I'm not trying to say that politicians' kids should undergo this, no. But everybody knows around that you cannot get into that league where you can mess around with them. It's because they know that they are the ones who are empowered to bring you to justice. And that is what exists everywhere. Like for me, eye-opener was the assumption that it happens maybe only in developing nations where the law system is not as strong and prevalent. No, that's not the case, unfortunately. Even the most of the developed nations in the world are undergoing the same. And it's just going to lead some way or the other into a very negative hassle, someday or the other. It's just waiting to explode, nothing else. They are creating their own homegrown terrorists. Whom are they going to fight tomorrow? 1 or 2 decades down the day, they will have their own men who will be against them.
And since rape is about power, when you take what is the most powerful thing is the military or armed forces of any kind, where the chain of command and everything is hierarchical, the whole system is hierarchical. So in those situations, it's the perfect recipe.
I think yes, first of all, any organization that's literally set up with the hierarchy and with the purpose of, consider the length of that hierarchy, right? And literally the idea of that this person is more valuable than these people down here, that they're replaceable, that they're insignificant, versus, it's just bound to be this way. And the military, the rape culture is very easy to create, and it functions beautifully within this system. It couldn't in a different type of system, right? A little unrelated, but I was at a women's rights training a few months ago, and we did this giant exercise where we had a tree on the floor, and we had to think of any problem addressing, issue that women have somewhere. And we took all of these things, and then we're supposed to think one step beyond. But what is the source of this problem? But then what is the source of this problem? So, whatever it may be, lack of housing, right, for women, or sex workers, or whatever it may be. The discrimination, well, what is the cause of that? What is the cause of that? And in the end, when we did this activity completely separately, the last thing that was left at the roots of the tree, every single person, all 20 participants, without talking to each other, came up with power. All 20 participants at the bottom of that tree had power as the source of, whatever it may be. Maybe it's money, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. Why do we want money? Because it brings us power. And with power at the bottom of those roots, just really, of course, it's been a few months since this training happened. I don't have any answers. But I think that, power is just one of the really scariest things in the world, and the way that we wield it, or the way that we use it, or the way that we choose to share it is what determines our society. And the military is just one really good example of how not to utilize it.
In the US, I mean, there is a 911, which is the emergency helpline. I don't know, do people make calls? I mean, because sometimes the assault, I mean, has like a couple of hours building up to it. You know, like you said, people were drinking, and then eventually it happened. I mean, so I don't know if women kind of get a whiff that an assault is likely to happen. Do they call? Is there like anybody who shows up? I mean, if something is building up to an assault.
You can't call the emergency line and say, I think I might be raped this evening.
That's what my question was. I mean, can you really? Because medical emergencies, you can. If you're getting murdered, you can. An assault cannot be called for on an emergency line.
Nobody would respond until something is actively happening or your safety is being threatened. Nobody's going to respond.
But isn't that the case in an assault? I mean, a situation leading to a rape is something very close to.
I've never actually heard of anyone who has ever been in that situation or even thought to do that. Because I think, all the examples given in this movie were actually really good, realistic examples of what happens. Drugging is really common in the military, really, really common. Drinking is embedded in the culture of the military, right? And then this whole idea of, the power structures, that you're in your boss's office, your supervisor's office, your commander, like where are you going to go to call 911, or especially with drugs involved, it's just impossible. The majority of women that so one of the things that in Turkey, for example, the women who would come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, the most common stories that they had was that they were being raped going out to use the toilet at night. And that was, sometimes it's like half a kilometer away from where your bed is. And so there's these giant tents, 40, 50 women in a tent, and then you go outside and you have to walk that half kilometer. And you have a flashlight, but you don't have a weapon, right? You have to turn in your weapon when you get on the base. And there's a lot of, it just became the thing for men, that you hang out and, you could rape somebody in that situation. And then it started happening that the women started, not drinking water after 3 p.m. so that they wouldn't have to go to the bathroom. Of course, then there's a lot of dehydration issues and all of this stuff. And then it came down to, well, this is why women aren't fit for combat. This is why women shouldn't be out in Iraq and things like that. And then, of course, the next tactic was going out in groups. So 4 or 5 women would go out together to go use the toilet. And the response to that was, that there would be 4, 5, 6, 7 men waiting. So it's really just a chain, an endless chain, until something at the beginning of the chain that set off all of these things changes.
Isn't it remarkable also that this story has been completely invisible in the cinema?
Yeah.
In Hollywood.
No, it's not been. There was one film, The General's Daughter.
One?
Yeah, one.
One film.
But there's millions of people being raped. It's one film. What about all the people and all the useless shit going on in the military planes and hoorah and all this? How many movies are on that?
They're all funded by the military, so.
Exactly. But they're to portray this culture that is amazing for men, right? It's wonderful for men. So the dominating power again gets to control what type of movies are made and whose voice is heard in those movies.
I have a question. We're talking about this entire patriarchal system where women are always discriminated, and at the same time, when we talk about rape, it has always been a weapon of war since times immemorial. So, what do you think? Isn't this sinister act being performed in every military institution all across the world? And
Whole damn world.
So it still remains invisible.
Yeah, and I'm sure we hear some of the terrible big stories when they become noticeable to, mainstream media, stuff that's happening in the Congo, Rwanda, Yugoslavia, all of that kind of stuff. Those are things that eventually catch the attention of people because of the scale that they're on. But what about all of those, it is literally, imagine every single military in the earth, that this is happening, that allows women and then blames the women for being there in the first place. But then again, look, militaries is just one thing. What about all the guerrilla forces? What about, all the anti-military or anti-governmental forces that are out there? That's a whole other category of people being raped. Especially in Africa.
I find one thing very surprising, that in this dialogue of military assaults and all of that, the perspective is also very white and very first world
Yeah.
Because every time there's been this mass outrage over war crimes and all of that, it's usually people from either a CNN or an independent American who's gone with a whole crew and reported things in Yugoslavia, Serbia, or wherever.
Yeah.
So the whole interpretation of the language is also very much predominantly white American kind of, so that's why. Yeah.
Which I wonder if there was a problem. To be honest, I would ask the filmmaker what exactly happened with how she found these people, what the responses were when she asked other people. There's that one person whose face they blacked out because she's still active duty. She's still there, right? And then what about surely she contacted a lot of women of color, right? What is it that's stopping them from speaking still? Even if they're out, even if they're retired, even if they're kicked out, what is it that's stopping them from speaking? Because there's something, definitely. I know that the number of women of color who are being raped are much higher than white women. And it was really interesting, the ranks too, right? There's a lot of officers, lieutenants, captains, like that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. I think they're probably, that speaks a lot also to the hierarchy outside of society. To get out of the military as a captain is very different to get out as a basic airman or an airman first class or whatever it is. And that what you have access to, VA or like jobs or whatever, is also very different. And I think that these women who are former officers probably have, me for example, probably have a lot more resources and ability to be able to speak about these things, to be able to actually come out with it, probably a lot more open, environments where we can talk about it. And probably a lot of the women of color, I think, are probably in a lot shittier situations and just unable to open up still.
The film had a slightly hopeful moment at the end, almost, with what's his name, the defense secretary saying...
not Secretary of Defense. something.
Yeah. Panetta.
Panetta, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know where that's gone.
I think it would be bad to end a movie on a very dead end kind of note, of course. But I cannot believe what's happened with this case. I cannot believe it. The facts are there, the witness, everybody's there. There's nothing missing from that case. The problem is those people making the decisions again are these white men whose interest it's in to perpetuate the system and to keep it going and stuff. But I hope that something's going to happen. I really, really hope that something. That these women didn't go out and share these stories and pour out their lives and everything for no reason. I hope that this movie has,
the movie's already made a huge impact.
Yeah.
Just one question, other than the commanders not, being in charge of making decisions about prosecutions, and is it also a general and larger critique of the military judicial system or court martials or because surely that cannot be the only right? I mean, the judiciary is hearing cases that are being raised within the military, all of that, and their conditioning, and the way they're looking at things. And, are they from the military? Are they also civilians?
It's really, the justice system is really complicated because it's completely separate from American real law, right? And there's so many things that are in that the code of military justice that are not, so many. I mean, come on, adultery can still be prosecuted. That's not in real life. That's not in real America or whatever. But it needs to be caught up to the real world. There's still, oh my God, this is really crazy. But there's actually, it's actually technically, the UCMJ says it's illegal to have sex in any position besides the missionary position. But it actually says that. And technically it is still enforceable. So it's really crazy that there hasn't been a reality check on what is going on there. And I mean, come on, the whole world's laws and everything need revision for the patriarchal, how it was created and who people, who was in power when it was created. But the military, I don't know what's going to make them look at that. I really don't know. The military is just this blinders on, we're doing the right thing, we are right and no power can stop us kind of mentality. And when will those blinders open up to just actually even think about other perspectives? I don't know.
So I think
Just one question. If it's so prevalent throughout the Washington and it's so prevalent in the American military system, I'm quite surprised that the military law doesn't provide any particular precise protection for women in military. This is very surprising considering it's so predominant and everyone knows about it, irrespective of the film or not the film. if the military law doesn't talk about it, or rather doesn't have any provision working towards it, then how do they survive? It's just the military implementation about the law, and not the codified law, which probably you know it better, which talks about it so that regulations are put in place. Any highlights on that?
Nobody changes.
Denial of the word.
No, everybody doesn't talk about it, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, this film has been a major breakthrough.
Revolutionary. And the thing is, until these scandals...
No, I meant in the military, everyone definitely knows about it.
No, everybody doesn't know about it.
No,
The
even
ones
people
who
know
the
about
victims
it.
know
Within
about
the
it. The
military, everybody's
people
in
who...
denial of it because it is not recorded on paper. It is not taken cognizance of.
But the idea is that everyone thinks that they're sweeping it under their rug and nobody's looking under their rug, right? But there's actually, when this started happening that, this scandal happened and then this scandal broke and then this scandal broke, that actually made people sit back and say, oh shit, somebody's going to find out sooner or later. But actually this still goes on until, the people who are in power and stuff continue to, now it's kind of, after this movie and after a lot of things, the last 5 years, I'd say, stuff has been brought to attention, especially the scale of scandals from like the military academies and stuff like that. It's finally being brought to like, you have an idea, right? Those trainings that came along and all of a sudden out of the blue, everyone has an idea that there is a problem that we're trying to pretend that we're solving. And we don't solve that by changing any laws because we don't edit the UCMJ really, right? It's just the law is what it is and it's still illegal to have, all of those things. But changing a law or the way that the UCMJ is set up right now is basically to help people, men, boys, get off from this and it to not be considered that serious of a crime. Like it showed some of the lists of things that were being, that you can be kind of let off with the slap on the wrist and, you can be, okay, so security people work 12 hours a day guarding a base, right? Sometimes your punishment for raping somebody is that you have to stand 18 hours a day as a guard. Yeah. And for 2 weeks, you have to do that for 2 weeks, and then voila, it's done. So it's like it's set up to get people off the hook. It's not set up to help women. And there weren't women in there at the time that the UCMJ was written, right? There were no women in the military when the UCMJ was
And in
written.
your dossier, it may not be recorded that you punished with this.
Right.
Maybe something else. So
Right.
It's not recorded.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't. Rape rarely. It rarely goes on your actual performance report. that follows you around for the rest of your life. Very rarely.
None of the rapists' names are there even in the end. So in a way, it is a message that while this film is so bold,
the assailants.
These women.
That would have been awesome if they just put up the name of
person's name is there as this man is the one who did it, and there's one guy who's who's the best serviceman in America. There's somebody who's promoted at the same time. But why don't we want to know? We want to know their names, but they're not there. So that is a very strong message of the fear that there is.
Yeah, that would have been good. That's a great idea. That is so awesome. They should have just asked every woman, whose names would you like to put up here as like your assailants?
I think they were scared of being liable lawsuits and all.
Why do you go to Supreme Court? It's public already. I mean, it's not that
But it's
not
alleged,
public,
no?
but it's even the film, which is so bold, will not record that because there is so much pressure of that system.
They were the usual track of alleged quote unquote.
Right.
Definition.
Can I quickly share? I do a lot of rides. I met some Israelis ride in the mountain. And because you're riding together for a couple of days, you drag together.
Go to Israel. Oh God.
Obviously, I asked them, why do you guys do this? You come to Kasol and you get wasted for 6 months. Why do you do this? I just want to understand. He said, we need to do it. We have to do it. Otherwise, we won't be sane like how you are. It's the kind of 3 years we do.
The things you have to do.
This is our, the other side. So we just come here and we get wasted. We need to do it.
I have a great plan. Let's make Kirby mandatory for everyone coming out of the military.
One on that. Men need to get it done. Then why do women also should have the same thing? Women also have to get it done. Then they are also in the military.
But they also do it. And there were girls on the ride. They said we also do it. So it's about the training, what you were mentioning.
Training in Israel, everybody just has to go and do it.
Everyone has to. It's part of
Whether you're a man or a woman.
What do they use? They see that. It's rarely that it's coming out when they're doing something.
But imagine that, again, Israeli soldiers, 18, 19, 20, they're all that age, right? All of them are that age. And then to go off and your mission for the day is to destroy 25 houses in the Gaza Strip, and you have to do it, and it doesn't matter whether or not it doesn't matter what you think or you feel or what your opinion is, you have to do it.
And it's compulsory. It's
Yeah,
not going on.
yeah. Otherwise you'll go to jail. You'll go to jail if you don't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Just a question. The video that you showed, the recruitment video that we saw, obviously you only had men in the video.
Yeah.
Is there any separate communication that the recruitment drive that shows women as
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
There's very specific things looking at women can, and especially when something happens where a law changes, women are allowed to fly in combat or something. Around that time, there's a lot of things that come out trying to really recruit women and show that the military is an equal place or whatever. You know what? I will say this: legally, the military is a wonderful place. Legally, how things are supposed to be and how we like to pretend they are, it is wonderful. It is the first organization that required racial integration, women's integration, and it will be probably the first national institution that recognizes gay and lesbian marriages. It probably will have to be very soon. In the next 2 years, I think it will become the only national institution that has to recognize those marriages. In that sense, they're very forward and they're very radical and liberal, but reality is obviously very different.
with the tone of the communication. Because
Yeah.
obviously I can't imagine the recruitment video not being aggressive. You have to you have to be a little aggressive and hence be turned masculine.
Yeah.
Can't really have a
Feels
sensitive
other
video
things, too.
recruiting people in the military.
I think that whole,
It's a
be
tone.
all you can be and, an army of one and all of that stuff is very, like I said, especially to kids who are stuck in little town America with no education options, with no career options. If you start working in that town, you're going to be there for the next 30 years. Why not go see the world? Why not travel? Why not have education?
Does a woman in the army commit the same kind of atrocities?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What is Abu Ghraib, right? Come on. There was those photos of all the women soldiers and everything. Yeah. I mean, if there was somebody under women to be raping and abusing, probably it would be happening. Because there are, right? There's Iraqi men to be abusing, so they are. Yes, nice and depressing.
Okay, I think we
Great.
stop here and thank you very much.
Thanks.